All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the 2 Plus podcast. We have a special episode today. We're joined by a player that is very active on the competitive scene. You'd say at the top level of the competitive scene, both in real life and online, which is what we're going to talk about today. Goes by the name of Pash. Pash, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's been a while. We've been trying to get this on the go for a little
Yeah.
while, so I'm glad we managed to get this on. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I suppose I should probably state my credentials
Yeah,
for
why
those
don't
that
you?
are
Because
unaware.
you were in the initial SBOT Square-based online tournament,
Yes,
and you placed, was it fourth, top five, I think,
I
from memory?
was fifth. I was fifth. Yeah,
Fifth,
with high elves. Yeah,
fifth with high elves, and you've since diverted to Chaos
the
in
Lords
SBOT
of
2
Chaos.
this
Yeah,
time
yeah,
round. And you're doing quite well. You've gone 3-0, and you're in the winners bracket now, which is the
so
final
far.
16.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us a little bit more about your Warhammer journey, how you got to this point. Are you old world only? Have you been a 20-year veteran? What's the tale?
Probably more than 20-year veteran. So I started my Warhammer life back in the beginnings of seventh edition. Mostly as a hobby. I enjoyed, pushing some toy soldiers around. I played a couple of like club events. Never really did anything spectacular. And then it was really eighth edition that I began doing it competitively. I really quite enjoyed the challenge of trying to, do well at events and figure out the sort of the puzzle of the matchups. And I would say the whole of the eighth edition, I was going to a lot of events, well, as many events as I can, and started to take it a bit more seriously. I was 95% of that time was always with my favorite army, which is High Elves. I played that, to death basically until the end where I sort of I flicked and changed a few. I tried some demons for a little while and just to try different things. But yeah, during that time I did big international events like the ETC, and a few other bits and pieces. So that was really good fun. And then Warhammer died, as we all like to
Mm.
forget. And I moved on to a few other gaming systems where I did them competitively as well, and that was good fun. And then obviously Old World came back, and I've been gun ho about it pretty much ever since. As soon as it started, yeah, I've been really, really keen for it. And then once that began, I've discovered this wonderful online community and online platform called Warhol, where people from all over the world can play games together, which is fantastic because sometimes to get a physical game going, it takes a lot of time out of your life. It's difficult to arrange between everybody's schedules, etc. So I found the ability to play games online, even though it's not as good as tabletop, I'll say it straight out. It's still a very useful tool, and that's what I've been involved with most recently, obviously with SBOT1, and now SBOT2 as well. So that's my credentials, and I've been doing okay. Like I think I haven't won any events yet. I seem to be losing one game every bloody event, which is frustrating. But that has been with Heil so far. I've sort of reached what I want to do with Heil, so I've parked them for a little while, and until the Arcane Journal comes out at least, and then I've given Chaos a little try to see if it tickles my fancy, and so far it's been quite good. It's been good fun.
Well, let's because we have some specifics we want to get to with this SBOT 2, namely, sorry, let me just go back here. This is getting ahead of the game here, but this is your list that you've taken to SBOT 2. We're going to get into what this video really boils down to, which was beating the Poison Death Star, which you've managed to
Yeah.
do in the third round. You're, as I said, undefeated. This is your list here for Warriors of Chaos. Before the specifics of the Poison Death Star, just what's the purpose of this list as a whole? What are like the key elements of it?
So when I designed this list, first of all, it's gone through maybe 20 or more different iterations, little tweaks, bits and pieces. I've changed things about it. I've played it. I've changed things again. So this is a sort of an evolution of an idea. And the original idea was just to build tough units where they're hard to get points out of. So the idea was, okay, you have this big block, or you have these units that you're going to struggle to get points out of. I then found that I sort of need a couple of little chaff units that can do bits and pieces, so that sort of got diluted a little bit. But I knew there was a couple of things I knew. I knew I didn't want a dragon. I knew that that list was sort of done and boring, let's be honest. And I knew that I wanted to try out all the sort of fun toys that Chaos had on offer. So you'll see the typical things in there. You'll see the puppet, you'll see the ogre blade, Chaos Lord, you'll see you'll see a spawn in there. There's a whole bunch of fun sort of things in there that I thought would be good to play, and I've tweaked them to a point where I'm happy with. I know what the list does. One of the things I quite like when I build my list, and this is the same for my high elf lists as well as these chaos ones, is I quite like 2 level 4s in it if I can. I think having the ability for all that big wide selection of spells is can be really quite powerful and flexible. This list specifically, I wanted to have essentially a chaos gun line. So you'll notice that both the level 4s have quite a good selection of magic missiles between them if they wanted to. The benefit of this is you can flex between having an all-out sort of gunline list. You can have five or I think 5 or 6 magic missiles, or you can just go back to like more of a combat buff type list where you can go, right, I'm just taking the buffs, and I'm going to sort of Death Star it up a little bit, which is essentially what I did against James, and his big Tomb King blob. But do you want me to take you through the list quickly just
Yeah.
to have a little look?
Quickly fight through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the Chaos Lord. He's got a 2 up, 4 up. Sorry, a 2 up, 5 up. He's got Mark of Nurgle, Ogre Blade, a couple of favors, and a Paymaster's coin for rerolling those attacks. That's actually been really quite helpful because sometimes you just fluff.
Mhm.
You can't do enough damage for it. Enchanting Aura for making everybody strikes last. That's a huge, huge part of it. Just means that all of your guys get to attack before your opponent most of the time. I've got 2 sorcerers, one who is Zinch on battle, extra spell in the puppet and the ruby ring. So that's a nice little gun platform. Sometimes you get an oaken shield out of it that you can put onto your key units as well. So that's quite helpful. Arcane Urgency is also very, 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 very key in this list if you can get it. If you don't, it limits your options a little bit. The other sorcerer is also a level 4 with an extra spell in Demonology. And that one's got the Tome of the Dark Gods. That's one of the new items from the Arcane Journal. And it's fantastic. It's really good. It essentially means you never have a bad selection of spells because you roll 5 spells, you get 1 or 2 that are terrible. You just swap them out for the nice Lore of Chaos signature spells. Like I've been taking Fleshy Abundance for the extra toughness. I've been taking Blue Fire. I've been taking the Summoning. You have a lot of really good options with that. So that's been one of my favorite sort of build
Can
parts
you,
of that
with
list.
Tome of the Dark Gods, can you take more than one of the signatures? I
Yes.
forget. Yeah, so you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
take
yeah.
all
So
of them.
you can take all of them if you wanted to, yeah. And I haven't had to do that because there's so many other good spells in Demonology.
Mm. Mm.
But let's say, for example, for my list, Steed of Shadows is useless. I have no infantry, so that's a duff spell.
Mm.
Vortex of Chaos, Vortex of Chaos, whatever it is terrible as well. Like it's just not a very good spell, so I usually default that. And then sometimes the assailment is not something that I need for my matchup, so I'll sometimes default that. So you can always take a really good selection of spells with that. I wish I could have it on the demon on the battle guy as well because there's so many times that I've taken Curse of Arrow Attraction and I just can't do anything with it.
Mm.
Or the Curse of Cowardly Flight where you make units panic, which has not really done anything at all ever, other than in my practice games where it seems to go against me. But never mind, that's another thing. Um, so that's the characters, basically just all mounted on steeds. They can go out individually if they want to. The other thing that this list was built for was basically it was built in mind with Bretonnians. Bretonnians and Wood Elves. So essentially, the reason I have him on the Chaos Lord that is I have him on a steed rather than a demonic mount or anything else is the 360 line of sight. So for the Bretonians, if they're, the Peg Knight starts to get tricksy with you, or the Wood Elves start disappearing into the sort of shadows, the Sorcerer Lord can come out and basically threaten to charge things quite comfortably. So that was a big part of it, the 360 line of charge. Now, as it happens, there's absolutely zero Bretonians in the top 16. So, that was useful. And what this list sort of struggles with, to be honest, is toughness 6 monsters like dragons and stuff. And there's lots of dragons and toughness 6 monsters in the top 16. So my meta guessing has not been particularly great, but the good thing about this is it's quite flexible. I'll go through the rest of it. You've got a big block of Chaos Knights. There's no mark on them, which means you can put all the characters into it if you want to. Um, they've got Magic Res 2. They've got the Icon of Darkness, which is -1 to shoot, which I thought would be useful, but the lists that I faced haven't really cared about that because Tomb Kings don't care, and a bunch of others don't really mind about that. So that was probably a mistake. I'd probably swap that out for a War Banner. I've got 2 units of Hounds and a unit of Marauder Horse. They're really there for a casting bunker for the Tzeentch battle guy. I probably would want them to be a little bit bigger, ideally. But they've been good. They've been serving their purpose. They're just ablative wounds, really, for the battle wizard. And then in the specials we have basically 2 Shartaks and a unit of 3 Dragon Ogres. Dragon Ogres, people know what they do. They are decent. They are good. I found the Shartaks to be more impressive than the Dragon Ogre unit itself, mainly because they're just so points efficient for 70 points. It's a lot of wounds. It's a lot of hits. They can go and hunt mage bunkers. They can go into the side of combats and take challenges. They're just a very versatile unit for 70 points. It's fantastic. We all know that Dragon Ogres are undercosted. So I'm quite happy with how they've performed at least. And then last but not least, the gigantic spawn. I knew I sort of wanted at least 1 gigantic spawn, and I did run with 2 for a little while. But I found that 1 was enough. It's just a really good tar pit unit. Random movement is really good for threatening units that are near you because it essentially means you can't go in within like maybe a 12-inch sort of like zone outside beside it because it can just charge you whichever way you go. It's very difficult to predict, and I think that's quite a useful ability. Plus, it's yeah, you can just pin units and get the rest of your guys in there. So it has been very, very helpful. So that's my list. I'm fairly happy with it. I so far it's done okay. I probably would make some amendments to it going forward, but I'm maybe like 95% happy with how it's turned out. It's not had any big upsets. It's just there's other things I wish it did better. Now that I can see what the field is, but that's hindsight, isn't it? You
Yeah.
always feel at the end of an event, you're like, oh, I would make all these changes. I wish I'd taken all of this. So yeah, that's
You,
that's how it panned out.
you speak about hindsight there, but was there an element of foresight with this being a counter to the poison block list? Did you have a sense, you said off air, if we call it that, that
Yeah,
you play against some of these your competitors in
yeah.
SBOT2 and the top tier guys? Did you know that this was the next step was these guys testing out 100 skeleton archers with poison?
So I knew I played basically before the spot. I think I played against the big skeleton block maybe 4 or 5 times. So I've seen different iterations of it, and it progressively got better and better. Um, and I tried different tactics against it, to a point where I was like, okay, I know what I need to do against it. And yeah, I did tweak my list a little bit. I think the changes that I made were add another couple of Chaos Knights, rather than I think I had 8 originally. I went to 10, and I think I did originally go with double battle level 4s, but demonology I thought was a bit more of a fun lore, and it would help me in those sort of matchups. So I made some tweaks to the existing list. Thought my I knew there was going to be a few people running that sort of list, and I thought what would happen is over the course of the whole tournament, that list would get found out somewhere. You would think that it would hit something and it would struggle against it, and it wouldn't make it through to the sort of the final stages.
Mm.
We'll see if that's been true, but it's I didn't think it would be as big of an impact as it has been. But now looking at it, it makes sense because if you've never played against the big, massive Tomb King blob type list, and you have no idea what to do about it, you'll basically go, oh, maybe I can shoot it. No. Maybe I can throw a couple of units at it. No. Like you really need a solid plan, and you need to follow through with it, and you need to commit. Otherwise, it will just win out. So that's one that has a very steep learning curve. But once you know what the plan is, I think it's manageable. So it's a bully list.
Yeah.
It's not one that people want to play against, and it's quite scary on paper. And it's quite scary in person also, but it's not undefeatable. It's certainly something you can work your way around. So, but I do think that you need to have the right tools in your list, because if you don't have them, you are going to struggle. And or some I think some matchups are almost unwinnable, really. Like you really have to get a lot of luck in order to win out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
This
I
is
think it's a big part
this
of it.
is the list that we're talking about for anyone who hasn't seen the hype around it. This is the list that you beat, James. It was one of three, I think,
Yeah, three, I
of
think it was. Yeah.
iterations of this in SBOT2. So you can see the main point is 105 Royal Host Archers. They have the poison banner on a BSB, I believe it is, in this list. I could be wrong,
Well,
but
the
sorry,
poison is
amulet, did you say?
actually
There.
it's the amulet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on a bloody champion, so it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. That
Yeah.
champion's dishing out the poison to like 100 plus guys. It's quite impressive what one little 5 point model can do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
And it comes up in your, so for those as well who haven't seen it, Pash has uploaded his Warhol battle report of this game. And I think he killed the champion twice and he raises it
Or at
back to
least,
life.
yeah. Well, this is the other problem is he just keeps coming back. You think
Yeah.
he's dead? No, he just keeps coming back, and
Yeah.
that's a frustration. But hey ho, that's that's how the list works.
And the other part of it, obviously, elementalism caster with Lore Familiar Power Scroll, travel mystical pathways, teleport
Yep.
it, point and shoot in the first turn of your game against James.
Yeah.
Teleports up the field and just eliminates the giant spawn. I think it was 14 poisons or
One shot.
16.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it was dead. It was very, very dead. So if you haven't seen this sort of list and you've not watched my amazing video, the way it works is essentially you have one big massive unit which holds all the characters in it, at least the ones on chariots. Sometimes the priests sit outside of the unit because they don't really need to be in it all the time. It has a couple of little units around the side that do little bits and pieces, but the main gameplay is in that big unit. And the point is it has a lot of rules interactions which I'm not comfortable with, I'll be honest. I think they are not a very friendly interpretation of the rules. But it is how it is at the moment. For example, the TMP, the Travel Mystical Paths, allows that unit to just go crazy distances because it's measured essentially corner to corner. You have this big unit. So if you go on this corner, suddenly you can travel 12 inches, which means the whole unit is over. It's ridiculous. So, there's a few things that need to be adjusted about the way that the community interprets the rules, or ideally how Games Workshop have the rules written down. So the few things that need to be done. But basically, that unit can teleport around. It has reserve move. It's very mobile. It also is able to use volley fire when moving, which is a big part of it. So you've got this big, massive block that can basically delete a unit a turn, or get it to a point where it's going to be near unusable. And that's the really difficult part about facing it is you can't hesitate, you can't dance around it. You have to commit to engaging that unit as soon as you can, but you have to commit with such a force that you're not just going to get steamrolled. You have to, grind against that big block and make sure that you're winning combats constantly so you can actually get out. The problem, of course, then is those characters. You've got the primarily the three chariot characters. You've got quite a killy sort of Tomb King, who he'll usually challenge you. He can dispense his wounds between the two heralds as well. So in essence, you have a 17 wound Tomb King model. You can't killing blow it. You can't monster slay it. It's generally weapon skill 6 or 7. So most things hit it on 4s at best. Sometimes it'll have glittering robe, so you're hitting it on 5s or 6s, and it's just very, very, very tough. And then once you do put some wounds on it, lo and behold, they heal them back. With those priests that are not in the unit. So it is a very, very tough list. It's just a lot of very nasty sort of rules interactions, and it's not fun playing against it. A lot of people have said, even despite if you ignore how strong it might be, just the sheer gaming aspect of it is just not
Yeah.
something that a lot of people want to engage with. Like, imagine you turned up to a tournament in person and you're like, oh, this is my first event. This is great fun. I love Warhammer. I've brought my nice little fluffy list, or even if you you think you're doing all right. And then somebody goes, right, here's my movement trait. This is a unit of 120, 30 guys. What are you going to do about it? And you go, just shake hands and
Yeah.
leave. And to be honest, yeah, it has had a bit of a reaction. I think it's definitely a meta changing list. And that sort of theme is something that you will have to build towards going forward, unless there's any, community comp changes or any sort of GW
Mm.
changes on some of these rules. Because it does do very well. It is difficult to play against. And you probably need a fair bit of practice before you realize what you actually need to do about it. And even then, you need a bit of luck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of things. Like there's not basically, if you are playing this list, if you are the person playing this Tomb King list, there's not a huge amount of things that can go wrong. It's not. I'm not saying it's easy to pilot, very much not, but it has a low sort of floor of things that can go wrong. Unit's not going to panic and run off the table. You're not going to miscast and delete half the unit. Like there's very little that can really go wrong with it. So you almost just go, right, I can delete a unit a turn, even if it's crappy. I can still win games. Like especially in a win-loss draw system, this list does quite well in that because it loses very rarely, very difficult to lose, and very easy to just win by a little bit. So yeah,
Well,
it's a boogeyman.
I've got a couple of screenshots from your game. Sorry for it might be a bit blurry, but I'll just quickly whip through them because it shows the main strategy that you used and
Yeah,
is probably the best strategy to beat it, which is combo charging,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
just grinding, grinding, grinding. So this is your turn two. You get these three charges off with your
yeah,
Chaos Knight bus, your Shartak, the remainder of your Dragon Ogres there. They
yeah,
get in the front, you manage to maximize a fair amount of them. And I
yeah.
think at the end of this combat, you do something like 23 or
Oh
18.
yeah, yeah. It was big, big combat res. I think basically for every combat res in that combat for the subsequent turns, it was high teens, low 20s amount of
Yeah,
combat res. It was because you're killing skeletons, but
exactly. Yeah.
it's actually not. It's harder than it sounds because what people don't realize sometimes is that those skeletons can be weapon skill 6.
Mm.
Because of My Will Be Done, which gives you D3 D3 weapon skill. There's a banner that gives them +1 weapon skill. The general, the Tomb King, has a shield of Patra, which gives you -1 weapon skill when you direct weapon attacks against them. It can be very, very difficult without even Glittering Robe, which he actually had on at this point as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then they can also have a spell that gives them reroll ones to hit. Like this is, it's a lot stacking a lot of really good rules and abilities. So it is difficult even at the best circumstances. But I think genuinely the best way, the only way to defeat this sort of list is to combo charge it and with as many units as you can, all in one turn, and just try and grind it out.
Yeah.
It becomes tricky because you want to attack skeletons to get as much combat res as you can. They're easier to kill, but sometimes not the easiest to actually attack. You also want to get rid of those characters, but it's very, very difficult because the wounds get bounced around. What you can see in that screenshot there, particularly at the very back of that unit with a little blue marker on it, that is actually one of his priests. Yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
And he can raise back wounds. So even if you do a couple of wounds to the Tomb King, a couple of wounds here and there, that's not enough. He'll just raise them back. You basically either do nothing and attack the skeletons as much as you can, or you go full tilt and you try and kill or do as much wounds as you can to a hero. What actually happened subsequently in this combat is the Dragon Ogres on the left-hand side there, they're actually in combat with his Illusion Priest, literally right in the corner
Yeah.
there. Yeah,
In
right
there.
there.
Yeah.
And I had to basically decide to either go against the character, which it would have been nice, or to try and just kill the Illusion Priest. And I basically went all the Dragon Ogre attacks on that Illusion Priest because I knew that that's something I can maybe kill. Because if I do one wound to it, it would be terrible. I need to put everything to it, and try and kill it, which he did die, which meant that took Glittering Robe out of the equation. And then basically everybody else tries to grind as much as possible. So what's that? That's
Yeah. So
27
this is the
combat res.
combat
But
res. combat res that
Yeah.
Pash is doing on the floor, 5, 10, 15,
Yeah.
20,
I mean, to be
27.
fair, I mean, look at all the stacked buffs that I've got on it. I've got the two demonic spells that buff you. So I've got the one that gives you extra attacks, the one that gives you extra
Yeah.
toughness. I've got fleshy abundance on them. So those Chaos Knights are now toughness 6. They've got 2 attacks each, AP minus 3 technically because they had lances at this point. The horses have got 2 attacks each, strength 5, AP minus 1. So like you're stacking as much as you can against it to swing the odds in your favor. And it looks big, but look how much combat res he got. He got what, 17, 18, something like that. Like it was
Yeah.
a lot. I think I lost about 4 knights on the stand and shoot as well.
Yeah. I
And
think that was that little 4 there.
that's what that 4 was. And I think that was actually I got away lightly there because he only managed to see it with about half the unit or not even
Mm.
not even half. So I actually think I got away lightly when I did lose only 4 because that's a scary thing is if you lose so many on the way in, you're going to struggle. You need to make it to combat with as many of your sort of grinding units as you can and as soon as you can, because if this happened in say turn 4, there's not enough turns in the game for me to
Mm.
grind through that unit. So yeah, it's a very 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 tricky little matchup, but it
Because
is
I
it is
think
fun when it works.
you can see here. So I think I'll just whip through the rest of these things because you can see as you are dwindling down him, you're also getting dwindled down. It's not like he's not
Yeah,
doing any wounds. He's actually
yeah. I
doing
mean the
damage
Shartak
back to
is
you.
dead at this point. Yeah, like you can
Yeah.
see he's gone.
And then you manage to get
The
a
unit
combo
losing
charge
that
off
guy.
again, but you can see you're still losing
Yeah,
guys. And I think then you
you're
lose
bleeding points.
a bit more. So it's not like it's just you absolutely hacking skeletons and getting nothing
No.
back. Um, I think this might be the last one I have because this is as far as I got. And um, I think that might be, is that the general there?
Yeah, that's the
Is
Tomb
Tomb
King.
King? Yeah.
And this is probably my turn 6. Oh, well, you can't see because we had a bit of a bug. But yeah, this is actually, I believe, oh, he went first. So this must be my turn 5. Um, before his last turn. Yeah, that must be what it is. And basically at this point, all the skeletons are dead. And he just had the characters. Now he gave ground, and I followed up. So I actually killed his sort of cheaper herald who's just there for extra wounds. So what's happening at this point is I'm facing. I have a Chaos Knight standard bearer because the champion died in a challenge. I have my Chaos Lord and I have my Battle Wizard. Both who have taken a wound, I think. The Demonology guy's dead at this point. And I'm currently facing the Tomb King General with his BSB Herald in my flank and a Killing Blow Scorpion in the other flank. And this is the point where I have to be like, okay, what's next? What do I do? Because if I don't, um, it, it I sort of did my maths, and I think it was actually quite close at this point. And I thought, right, if I can take out his Tomb King, things start to crumble, and that's like 400 odd points. So that should get me a win, even if I lose the Chaos Knight guy who I actually thought was going to die, or maybe even one of the sorcerers. So I thought if it's worth the risk to charge in to kill that guy in order to get the points for that to hopefully crumble a few other bits and pieces because he had the end of my turn to crumble, then he had the beginning of his turn to crumble. So 2 crumble tests worth of stuff. And that did end up winning out. I think in the end, that combat, I won combat res by maybe like 4, and then he had his indomitable banner, which made him crumble. I think it was two less. So I literally killed him just like on the point, on exactly enough wounds. It wasn't a blast through. It wasn't a huge amount of overkill or anything like that. It was down to the very last tiny little wound. Like honestly, the amount of times in this matchup that if this had changed by 1, like if this I had an extra to roll here, or he had 1 extra combat res here, like it could have really changed the outcome of the game. As it happened, the Tomb King died. Things started to crumble. His Herald crumbled. His Scorpions, I think both of them over the course of 2 crumble tests also crumbled. And then I was left in my turn 6 just facing a Tomb King chariot. And that was all. So I charged in just for fun and killed that, but like it was down to the wire up until this very last point.
Yeah, sounds like the definition of a grind.
It
Um,
was, yeah, it was a grind.
we
And
might
that's the
have
thing.
to we might have to start a new record because this one's only got about two
That's
minutes
fine.
left or so. So we can off the back of this we'll kind of go into like bigger picture stuff, I suppose, because
Sure.
like I haven't, as I said, I haven't finished this video, but when I saw you starting to deplete the unit, I
Yeah.
was like, oh, he'll get it, but then it just still gets to
It
a
was still
bloody
close. And I
yeah.
didn't realize how close it was because I didn't realize how risky that charge was. Because if I had lost one of my characters, it could have turned out very different. So even though
Hmm.
this end score is quite big, it's still it isn't it's not really reflective of how close the game was towards the very end.
Yeah. So with the takeaways from your experience against the list,
Yep.
there was a lot of bad press about the poison block. You beat
Yeah.
it, but it seemed like it
Grind.
was like
Yeah.
tight until the end. Do you think
Yeah.
this list is the new meta setter, and is it the hardest list to beat?
I think that it is going to be one of these meta lists that you're going to need to build yours against or with in mind. And if you're going into an event and you're looking at it from a competitive perspective, especially one where, an online event, there's no restriction on models. Like you can bring whatever you want. So you're expecting to see the sort of the best that people can put together. If it's a real life event, it's a little bit different because meta shifts a little bit slower in real life. You've got to paint things up. But if you are turning up to an event and you go, right, what am I likely to face at this very large event? I'm probably going to face Vampire Screams. So I need to think about that. I'm probably going to face Bretonians, likely with the Falcon Horn. So I need to think about that. I'm going to face Tomb Kings in many flavors. And now after this, you'll go, what's my plan against a big, massive blob unit? What can I do against that? I need like if I face it, I need a plan against that. So it's going to be one of these things where you have to build towards. I wouldn't build towards it exclusively. I don't think everybody's going to be running these lists because they're quite boring, I think, to be honest. But I think it's definitely something that people will need to take into consideration when they're building the list. And I certainly will be taking it more into consideration going forward, especially if there's no imminent rule changes or comp changes on these sort of lists. Um, and to be honest, it's not like in terms of online versus real world events, it's not too difficult to build this sort of list in real life. I mean, painting 100 skeletons, you could probably do that in a couple of days. Just, spray, dry brush, boom, 100 skeletons. Like it's not the end of the world. I really hope I don't see it in person because it's not a fun list to play against. But it might be. It might be something going forward. However, what I did mention at the beginning of this SBOT event is that I think after this event, people will be asking for comp um more common sort of comp restrictions and bits and pieces and some of us have been talking about what could possibly mitigate this sort of list or other nasty things. And there's a few ideas that are sort of in the making that I hope that people take up. But it all depends on TOs run their own events. They decide on what gets played there. So it really does depend. But you have to respect the larger events that, you know, because they sort of set the standards that a lot of people will follow or they'll make their own amendments going off, which is why I think these sort of events, it's really important to have something come out of them or have some sort of conclusion. Because if you just have this event and we just go on and then people start making these sort of lists in real life, then I think it becomes not a very friendly atmosphere at some of the events. I mean, look at it this way. So there's 130 people in SBOT2. 16 of them made it to the final sort of winners bracket. Out of those 16 lists, there are 8 Tomb Kings. There's 8 Tomb Kings of all flavors: Mortuary Cult, Grand Army, and obviously this Royal Host bullshit. There's all sorts. So Tomb Kings are obviously good. Um, they're definitely something that people need to think about and maybe suggest some comp. And I don't think that's a reaction thing. I think that's been pretty consistent since the beginning of the old world. They're definitely they have them and the Bretonians have the poster child syndrome, don't they? Because they wanted to make sure they were good,
This is
therefore
a
they are
yeah.
good.
Alex informed me, my naive self, of whatever the most recent thing Games Workshop releases will be the strongest thing in the meta because
Yeah,
they want to
yeah,
sell models. And when you look at the Tomb King special rules, it's incredible what they have on
yeah,
offer and the breadth of it. And you look at Bretonia, you need to go no further, although you might not be able to go much further than Pegasus Knights, because outside of them, they seem a little bit thin, but they are so good that it's. I played against them for the first time in real life on the weekend at a
yeah,
tournament, and they just plonk them in the middle, and 20 inches around them is their threat range,
yeah.
and it's so hard to get it away from.
Very
But
difficult.
Alex, you have you've managed to stop yourself from going onto Warhol because it does feel like a different beast. And I want to get your take on Alex and obviously Pash's, but what's the difference at this competitive level? Because we seem to see in SBOTs, at least the two that we've had, just this extreme meta. Like there's almost like no, not shame's not the right word, but no one holds back. The top guys go, this is the mathematically strongest list that is the hardest to beat. Um, but it doesn't necessarily
We've
transfer
always said
directly.
that it's the world championship from the
Yeah.
outset, and that was a hot take of ours early. I think Ed probably got onto it quicker, and we sort of pride ourselves on being aware of it, like Paddy and I are competitive, but it's certainly the world championship. And there were lists, like even just some of the other lists from SBOT 1 in different factions that were good, just tight lists. And if you were playing, you could have just gone back through, rifled through the SBOT list, and you probably had one of the better versions. I felt like it was good that this came really quickly. Full credit to Denarius, you, Pash, other people who've done well. It's a grind, like
Mm.
playing online, and it is very abstract. Does it feel to you like there's a big difference between playing online and playing in real life?
Yes. Um, Online is easier, I would say. It's easier in several
Interesting.
ways. First of all, you have an undo button. You know, you can measure super precisely down to the like millimeters. Like you can't do the amount you have greater accuracy in an online game than you do in real life. In real life, where you're like, is that in? I don't know, let's four up it. In online, you'd be like, laser focus, this is laser accurate, this is exactly what it is. Um, so online is almost too accurate, which can sometimes lead to slower games. In fact, people who are new to Warhol, new to online sort of Warhammer, their games can take a while. Like, or even in a tight game like the Denarius, like we like to talk about him, but like his semi-final was 7 hours long. That's a very long game. You know,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it was a 7 hour game, and okay, that's a top table.
Sorry.
We've got, as long as we can. Um, and but I have seen even in my pod, I have seen people take 6 hours to play a game, and that is a very, very long time. Okay, this time they have sort of said if you want a timer, start a timer. But at what point do you say, maybe we should start a timer? It certainly isn't in the fourth hour. By that point, you've already committed that you're playing this out till the end.
Mm.
But because you can get that analysis paralysis where you're like, I can make this perfect, therefore I should try to make
Mm.
it perfect. So yeah, online can be too accurate in my opinion. Oh, the time limit is another thing where generally people play without a time limit. Generally, although the final in last Esport was played to time, so that was another factor. Because there is a skill to playing your game quickly. If you are a real life event, you have, let's say, 3 hours to play your game. You need to finish all your 6 turns because a lot of armies will get points in the last couple of turns. A lot of games will finish in, turn sort of 5 or 6. The game that I loaded up against James and the Tomb King host, that really changed in turn 5. If you finished that game in turn 3, then it would have been a much, much more different result, and some armies would benefit from that. So yeah, it is different. Also, from a meta perspective, you can try any sort of wild, crazy ideas online. You can run 3 dragon chaos lists. You can run, you know, 200 skeleton lists. Like all these things that in physical games are a restriction, you can do them online and go crazy. And that's a benefit and a detriment. It's a benefit because you get to find out, especially at these sort of events, what what is the best we can make this type of list? What was the best we can, make this idea, or what's the best we can do? Like you say, mathematically, the most correct way of, doing this. But also the detriment is you can take anything, therefore the meta online is very different to the meta in real life.
Hmm.
Because and you can sort of get lost in that because if you play online a lot and then you go to a real world event and you go, right, I'm going to be facing massive Toon King blobs, I'm going to be facing, Pegasus Knights, Green Knight, everything, and then you go and you just turn up and people have brought, Chaos Dwarf lists, Lizard lists, a Skaven guy, and
Mm.
you're like, I don't know how to play any of these armies because they don't like. So I have not played a Chaos Dwarf list yet,
Mm.
which seems like small, but we actually have 3 people locally here who play Chaos Dwarfs regularly. I've attended events where all 3 of them have been there, and I've just never managed to get drawn up against them. So I actually don't know what Chaos Dwarfs really do in real life. Um, and that's the thing with some of these is you get to know how to play the top tier, more efficient versions of lists, but you can actually get caught out by things that you just don't play very regularly, or don't know how it works because it's not something you've come up against. So yeah, you can get lost in it.
I
But it
remember
is,
there was a game in SBOT 1 between you and Buster Move, the other high elf
mm,
player that did well
yeah,
in that tournament. This is when Alex first keyed me on to you and Buster Move.
yeah,
And there was a moment, I think, on your turn 5, and it was a really tight game, and I think it may have been an 11-9 in the end or something really tight.
it was,
But
yeah,
you had Buster's 360 charger or charger arc had 3 into overlapping areas, and there was a tiny
yeah,
little spot where you put your
yeah,
BSB in the middle.
yeah,
And the only way
yeah,
you can do that is on Warhol. You're never going to do
yeah.
that in real life
No,
because you
exactly.
have those visible aids of millimeter perfect stuff, and that just doesn't
Yeah,
happen in real life.
no, no, it's definitely a factor. That was a really, really good game. That was my very first game in SBOT, and I lost it by I think the difference was like 100 and
Yeah, it
something
was
points.
tight.
So it was very, very tight, and it was really, really good. He ended up finishing, I think, third or
Third,
fourth.
yeah,
Third it
maybe
was, yeah.
fourth. You're right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that was really good. That was a really good introduction to that one. But that's right. That gives you an idea of just how precise you can get with some of these measurements. The online version, you can move things, take them back, move things around, put arcs out, all the rest. You can, if you work that way, you can be super precise with your list, and it can work to your detriment. For example, I think with Denarius in his previous games, he was playing Wood Elves. There's a lot of flexible movement. You can, if given enough time, position everything perfectly, which in a real life game, you just don't have that time. You need to play fast games. But, when there is no time limit, you can take 7 hours to play a game, if your opponent lets you, which is
How does
painful.
time work? I played chess a lot, and it's obviously you move, bang,
Yeah.
makes sense. People are whipping out the chess clocks now, but I was playing that Sisters Sky Cutters on the weekend, and I feel like I was probably taking 90% of the time moving
Yeah.
skirmishes around. So when they say, oh, you can just use a clock, I don't feel like that's translates as well a lot of the time. Some people have, I'm just marching my guys, I'm
Yeah.
done, and is it the clock is just on your turn, or is it
Yeah.
you
So
click it when you're waiting for them to make a decision?
there is a clock feature in Warhol, um, which I have never used. So I only know this in theory. The theory is that if you agree with your opponent that we're going to play this game in 3 hours, we're each going to get an hour and a half, to do all of our actions, and that you sort of keep track of your individual timers. If your timer runs out, say turn 4 or whatever, you've run out of your hour and a half, you've done everything, you then can only make reaction actions. So you can't like cast spells, but you can, roll to hit and stuff if you're in combat. You're not doing anything active in the game. You're basically just being passive for the rest of the game. That's how a clock works in theory. Which is, I've played other games which use a clock as well, and it's sort of a similar scenario where basically once you run out of time, you start only taking reactive actions, not active actions. And it's not a bad idea, to be honest. It might be a little bit harsh in the first couple of rounds when, especially, you're playing near people and they're getting used to the online play and stuff like that. But actually, even in real life, I don't want to play a 7-hour game of Warhammer as much as I love it. I just want to. I'd rather play 2 games at that time and get lunch. Like it's I think there is a skill to playing games quickly, and the way you do that is by repetition, by playing your list multiple times, and being able to get your plan sort of in order. It's like all my games now. I mean, the online ones you see, they take around about 3 hours sometimes, depending on how it goes. Sometimes you have technical difficulties. Um, but I've played this specific list or variations of it for probably about 30 games now. So I know what I'm doing, what all my stuff does, and most of the time I'll know what my opponent's stuff does, at least in principle. So, you're not spending a lot of time looking up rules, you're looking up tables, looking up bits and pieces. You're just going, right, this is going here. It hits on 3s, 5 dice, boom, 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 and then that's what it is. So yeah, repetition is definitely a thing. Knowledge and repetition, that's your 2 key factors in being able to play a quick game, both real life and online.
Pash, is some advice for people that are playing competitive in real life and would be considered good players, but maybe not like the top tier guys. Aside from, bring the strongest list, what's something people can do strategically, if it's list building or whatever, that makes them take that next level to kind of play at a higher level, do you think?
It sounds like you're projecting there, Paddy.
He's asking for a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Alex,
Just asking for a friend. Okay, well let's take it. So, in my opinion, your performance in a tournament is dependent on 3 factors. 40% of it is your list. So, if you bring a crap list, no matter how good a player you are, you're not going to do well enough. If you bring a fantastic list and you're a crap player, you're not going to do that well either. So, the list is probably about 40% of it. You need a solid list in order to be able to do well. Another 40% of it is how you play, is your skills as a player, knowing how rules work, etc., etc. That is a big factor. And that is the part that I find people struggle the most. Most people are, well, we have the internet. They can find out what a good list is. We have lots of data about what does well at events. They go, this is a good list. But if they don't know how to use it, it's quite telling. And you can sort of play around that. The last 20% is luck. It's a dice game. Yeah, okay, statistically this should happen. It could completely work the other way. So that luck factor is definitely plays a part, but you can stack the odds in your favor. So I'd say it's around about 20%. If you are somebody who wants to do better, plays well, can would like to do better, you want to address each one of those factors. So first of all, you want to make sure you're taking the right things in your list, and you do that by looking at probably what does well, what you like to play, because that's quite important. You need to like to play the type of list that you want to take. If that makes sense. You then need to get better as a player, really, and the way to do that is to play better players yourself, which is why the online version is so good, because you can play people across the world, and you can play them sort of in your own time, and you can test out different list ideas, etc. So play better players. If you find people like I actually lose quite a lot of my games, practice games, because I try things out, I push the boundaries, I go, right, what would happen if my Chaos Lord charges this dragon? Oh, he dies. Okay, maybe not do that. You want to stress test these things. Find somebody who is as good as you or better, and then just sort of rep against them, and test out sort of theories and ideas, because then they can sort of tell you what maybe to change as well, and that's a good way. That's maybe the other thing is to talk to people who know what they're talking about. So I quite often go, oh, I had this really good list idea. I want to create an all Skycutter high elf list. Great, fantastic. So then I'll go talk to the good high elf players and I go, right, what do you think of this? And then, sometimes they'll go, okay, have you considered the Falcon Horn? I go, well, maybe. They give you something to think about. So basically, talk to people who are good with that army, and then they can give you some pointers as well. And the last thing is luck. Now, of course, you can't control luck, but you can stack it in your favor, where you go, right, you don't really want to pick fair fights if you can avoid it. You want to try and overwhelm your opponent as much as possible. That means stacking all the buffs that you can onto your unit without risking it too much, sending it in, and then just, making sure that even if you have a little bit of bad luck, for example, when I charged James and he killed 4 of my knights at stand and shoot, it's okay because they had all the rest of the buffs that sort of made up for it as well. So yeah, try and address those those 3 elements: is make better lists, play better, and know the rules, and be more lucky. That's what I would recommend.
And the point of this video is to talk about the poison death star, or a lot of it anyway. That seems to be one step in what's been a procession of meta defining lists. You had initially, maybe even Screams was the first one, but definitely Dragons was very early. So Screams, Dragon, Mass Pillar, Bretonia, and now Poison Death Star. Might be missing some others. But what do you think is coming next?
I don't know.
Maybe an easier question is what is a part of Old World that's untapped that maybe people are looking into?
It's very hard to say. I mean, you've mentioned like 5 or 6 different sort of archetypes of lists. That to me speaks like a fairly healthy meta.
Yeah.
Like if it was just one, then that doesn't sound very good. That list needs addressing. But if it's like 5 or 6 different things, that sounds like we're developing a healthy meta, and people are still exploring the depth of the rules. I mean, how long was it ago since we sort of, as a community, discovered you can put chariots into foot units? I feel like that was only like a month ago or 2 months ago or whatever. Somebody went, oh, wait, did you know you could put a light chariot in a unit? And then now we have a list with 100 plus skeletons with 3 chariots in it. So like people are exploring that part of it. We are still, the game is not defined. We're still in the first year of it. I mean, if you remember, previous editions are 5 or 6 years old. And in that time they had lots of FAQs, erratas, books released, etc. So meta is still developing. I think if I had to take a guess, the one part that I don't think has really been fully explored is maybe the gun lines. And I think this might be on point. I'm predicting the future here. With the release of Empire, Arcane Journal, there is a rumor about the Nuln army list or Nuln. You'd imagine there'll be some sort of shooting-y type abilities. We haven't seen that taken to sort of an extreme. Okay, fine, the poison blocks are one element of that, but the artillery side of it and everything else, like we haven't really seen that being fully explored. I think people have sort of danced around it with having some archer units and other bits and pieces, but I think that it can be effective. Maybe with some rules tweaks, because I do think cannons are a little bit softer than they really should be, or maybe monsters a little bit harder than they should be. So if I had to guess at anything as being the next meta part is gun lines. I think there's still some depth there that's not fully explored. So we'll see what happens, and we'll know more once the Arcane Journal's released for Empire, which will hopefully be 1st of January. I don't know, or if Australia 5th of June or something. Let's be honest. It takes a while for somebody to walk these books to Australia and hand them over to the shop. But I think things will be interesting once we have that. Then we have the High Elf Arcane Journal, which who knows what happens. It would be nice to see infantry being more relevant. And I'm sort of secretly hoping with high elves that'll be the case because they have a lot of really good, tasty infantry units. Um, and then I guess we'll have, beastmen and wood elves. Wood elves, I think, if I have to project again, are probably the hidden secret best army. Okay, fine. People know that five pillars is good, but I think there's more to it. Like I think wood elves are actually possibly one of the best armies there. They're just very, very difficult to play. And like all
Mm.
elves, they just they collapse very quickly if something goes wrong. But if you do play well with them, Denarius did well in SBOT1. There's still two Wood Elves in the final 16 in SBOT2. So I think Wood Elves are probably the secret best army. Once we nerf Tomb Kings to a point and nobody wants to play them, Wood Elves are going to dominate. Definitely. Definitely.
All right, well, we better wrap it up there, Alex, unless you've got anything else you want to ask.
No, it's been great, Pash. I'm glad we got to do it. Hopefully, in the future, we can talk High Elves.
Oh, I'd love that. I am
It's an
so
interesting story, High Elves, just that they sort of rode that wave too, where it's been
yeah.
it's somewhat relevant and it's a bit underneath, but yeah, they do have some of the little things that might be good against the poison blob, but at the
They
same
do.
time, yeah, just feel a little bit underpowered. But I'd love to do the
They
full
do.
deep dive because I had some success playing it and you can feel the power is there, but yeah, not top
Yeah.
tier at the moment.
Yeah, and
Mm.
that was sort of the realization I came to after several events with them is that you can do a lot of really good things with them. They have a few really nice toys and abilities. Dragons are great, whatever. But they're definitely a tier lower than some of the other armies, like the Chaos, the Tomb Kings, probably the Wood Elves. Like that, I think like there's a noticeable gap there. Um, at least until the Arcane General releases. All that could change. And that's what I'm excited about, but I guess we won't see that until that comes around. So I think it would be good to see where Hyles sit now, and it'll be even more interesting to see what the new changes will be and how that'll affect them going forward. Because they can only get better, right? Arcane journals give you more options. There's usually something in it that's broken. They can only get better, and I'm excited to see what that is.
Yeah, as a way. Pash, thank you
Mm.
again. Good luck in the winners
Thank you very
bracket.
much.
And yeah, hopefully you can annihilate some more poison blobs.
Mm.
Fingers
Good
crossed. We'll
luck.
see. Thank you.
Good
All right.
luck.
All the
We'll
best.
talk
Cheers,
soon.
guys.
See you, mate.
All right.